At the turn of the 20th century, Europe was changing. Empires were collapsing, new ideologies were rising, and the world stood on the edge of something unknown. And in the middle of this storm, one man would rise, not with wisdom or compassion, but with ambition, anger, and an iron will. His name was Benito Mussolini, a man who would one day call himself Il Duce, the leader. But before that title, before the glory and before the full, there was a boy born in a small Italian village, with fire in his heart and rebellion in his soul. Music slowly builds. Benito Amilcare Andrea. Mussolini was born on July 29, 1883, in Predapio, a small town in northern Italy. His father, Alessandro Mussolini, was a blacksmith, a man of radical ideas, a socialist who hated the monarchy and the church. His mother, Rosa Maltoni, was a teacher, gentle, disciplined, and devoted to her son's education. From his father, Mussolini learned anger and revolution. From his mother, he learned discipline and intellect. And together, these two forces shaped his future. The fire of rebellion and the will to lead. As a boy, Mussolini was intelligent, but uncontrollable. He fought his teachers, argued with priests, and often bullied other students. He once stabbed a classmate with a penknife, a sign of the aggression that would later define his politics. After finishing school, he became a teacher, but his restless nature couldn't stay, confined to classrooms. He dreamed of something greater: power, purpose, destiny. He soon turned to politics inspired by the socialist ideas spreading across Europe. Music shifts to a hopeful yet intense Toto. At this time, Italy was a struggling young nation, poor, divided, and humiliated by its weak governments. People were tired of corruption and chaos. They wanted strength, unity, and pride. And Mussolini, fiery, bold, and charismatic, was ready to give them that dream. He began his political career as a socialist journalist. Through his articles, he attacked kings, priests, and the rich, calling for revolution and equality. His words were sharp, emotional, and dangerous. People loved listening to him, even those who disagreed with him, because he spoke with passion, not politics. But then came World War I, and this war changed everything. Sound of distant explosions, tension rises. Europe fell into chaos. Millions of soldiers marched to the front lines, and nations began to crumble. The socialist Mussolini suddenly changed his tone. He supported Italy's entry into the war. This shocked his comrades. They accused him of betraying socialism, and he was expelled from the party. But Mussolini had already seen something greater than ideology. He saw the power of nationalism. He saw how fear and pride could unite a nation. And so he founded a new movement, fascism. It was neither left nor right. It was a creed of strength, discipline, and loyalty to the nation. It promised to restore Italy's glory through power, unity, and force. By 1919, Mussolini formed his first group, Fasci di Combattimento, made up of war veterans, nationalists, and frustrated citizens. They wore black shirts and marched with pride. They called themselves the Black Shirts. Italy was in crisis. The economy was collapsing. Strikes and protests were everywhere, and fear of communism spread like fire. In this chaos, Mussolini's message found its audience. He promised to end disorder. He promised to rebuild Italy's pride. He promised a new Roman Empire, and the people were ready to believe him. By 1922, Mussolini's movement had become unstoppable. He gathered thousands of followers and led them in what would become one of the most dramatic political moves in history, the March on Rome. Armed with only faith and fanaticism, Mussolini's men surrounded the capital, demanding power. The Italian king, fearing civil war, gave in, and on October 29, 1922, Benito Mussolini, the rebellious boy from Predapio, became the youngest prime minister in Italian history. He was just 39 years old. Music softens, tone of realization. From a poor village boy to the ruler of Italy, from a socialist rebel to a fascist leader, Mussolini had achieved his dream, but his story had only just begun. When Mussolini entered Rome, he wasn't just walking into power. He was walking into history. Crowds cheered, soldiers saluted, and newspapers hailed him as the savior of Italy. But behind that smile lay a man who wanted total control. At first, Mussolini played the role of a democrat. He spoke of cooperation, of national unity, but slowly, quietly, he began to remove every obstacle in his path. Within 2 years, opposition, newspapers were banned, political parties were silenced, trade unions were dissolved, and Italy's fragile democracy had collapsed without a sound. Mussolini called himself Il, Deus meaning the leader. He believed he was chosen to reshape Italy's destiny. He wanted discipline like the army, loyalty like the church, and glory like ancient Rome. He told Italians, the nation is everything, the individual is nothing, and the people, worn down by poverty and chaos, began to believe it. Through propaganda, Mussolini built a new image of himself. Posters showed him riding horses, flying planes, working in fields, inspecting soldiers. He appeared everywhere. Strong, tireless, divine. Children were taught to adore him. Newspapers printed only his words. He became the face of the nation, the father of fascism. Under his rule, Italy changed. Trains began running on time. New roads, schools, and industries appeared. He drained swamps, built cities, and restored pride to a humiliated people. For many Italians, life seemed better, but freedom had vanished. Those who spoke against Il Duce disappeared. Some were imprisoned, others were killed in silence. The world outside saw order, but inside Italy, fear ruled every street. Yet Mussolini was not satisfied. He wanted to be seen not just as Italy's leader, but as the modern Caesar, the rebuilder of the Roman Empire. In 1935, he invaded Ethiopia, defying the League of Nations. His army crushed the resistance with brutal force, even using poison gas. Italy celebrated his victory, calling it revenge for ancient glory. But the world condemned him. Still, Mussolini's pride grew. He now stood beside another rising dictator, Adolf Hitler of Germany. At first, Mussolini saw Hitler as a reckless imitator, but soon their shared hunger for power and war drew them together. They formed the Rome-Berlin Axis, and fascism became the twin shadow of Nazism. Italy joined Hitler in World War II, but the dream of empire turned into a nightmare. Italian soldiers fought in Africa, Greece, and Russia, unprepared and unequipped. Defeats piled up, the people lost faith. All the promises of greatness faded into hunger, destruction, and loss. By 1943, the Italy Mussolini built now was collapsing. Allies invaded Sicily, the people rose against him, and on July 25, 1943, the same king who once gave him power had him arrested. The man who once ruled with fear now sat alone, betrayed, broken, and forgotten. But this was not the end of Mussolini's story. By 1943, the dream that Mussolini built had turned to ashes. His empire was broken, his allies were gone, and the Italian people, but once filled with pride, now filled the streets with anger. After his arrest, Mussolini was imprisoned in a remote mountain hotel. The man who once commanded millions was now guarded by a few soldiers. But Hitler, his last remaining friend, refused to let him fall. In a daring rescue mission, German paratroopers stormed the prison and freed him. It was a moment straight out of a movie, The Old Dictator Reborn. But in truth, Mussolini was already finished. Hitler made him the puppet ruler of a small region in northern Italy, the Republic of Salo. There, Mussolini tried to act like the old Il Duce again, giving speeches, signing orders, pretending to lead. But inside, he was hollow. He knew it was over. Every day, Allied bombs fell on Italian cities. Every week, his soldiers deserted. The people who once shouted, His name now cursed it. Mussolini often sat in silence, staring at old photographs of his glory days. He once said, "The end of a dictator always comes suddenly," and for him that moment was near. In April 1945, as Allied forces closed in, Mussolini tried to escape to Switzerland with his mistress Clara Petacci. They disguised themselves among retreating German soldiers, tired, defeated, desperate. But near the village of Dongo, Italian partisans recognized him. They stopped the convoy. And just like that, Il Duce's fate was sealed. On April 28, 1945, Benito Mussolini and Clara Petacci were executed by firing squad. Their bodies were taken to Milan and hung upside down in a public square. The crowd spat, shouted, and threw stones. It was not justice. It was vengeance. The man who once promised eternal glory and now lay broken before his own people. And yet Mussolini's story does not end with his death, because his shadow still lingers. He taught the world a painful lesson that nations do not fall to dictators overnight. They fall slowly, through fear, pride, and silence. When truth becomes dangerous and lies sound patriotic, tyranny grows quietly. Mussolini once said, "I would rather live one day as a lion than 100 years as a sheep." But history proved that such lions destroy their own jungles. Today, Mussolini's name stands as a warning of how a single voice, filled with anger and charm, can hypnotize a nation. His rule, absolute, but his fall, inevitable. And that is the story of Il Duce, the man who promised to make Italy great, and instead led it into darkness.